Welcome to First Watch. This is a series where I watch and review classic films for the very first time. We kind of had a trial run of this when I reviewed all the 50 Shades movies, but specifically for this series, I want to focus on famous movies, classic movies that a lot of people will probably be surprised that I haven't seen, because there's quite a few. And I don't want to spend every single one of these videos explaining why I haven't seen these films. Sometimes there's legitimate reasons. Sometimes it's just me being silly and stupid. That's probably the case today with Jaws, and that's where we're going to start with the 1975 classic Jaws. But before we get started, I just want to say, everyone out there, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. You can find all of our content at castellanicontent.com. There you'll find the post-game videos, you'll find movie-related stuff, you'll find I'll Say This, you'll find Chris and Company. Everything that your heart desires can be found there. All right, let's go on and talk about Steven Spielberg's classic. I don't believe that it was Steven Spielberg's first movie. I think that was Duel, which was a made-for-TV film, but I think that this was his first theatrical release. Don't quote me on that. I wanted to start with this one in particular because in many ways this film was the inception of what the summer blockbuster has become in the modern age. It's a very simple premise. It was the first film to ever make over $100 million at the box office, and while I've never seen it until recently, the mystique behind it and the stories that have come out about the filmmaking of it and how difficult it was with the mechanical shark, and it's always been a film that I've been interested in seeing. I've been on the ride. Is the ride still a thing at Universal? I remember in 2005 with my family, I went to Universal. We went on the Jaws ride. I'm kind of surprised. I was only 9 years old. And to be honest, one of the reasons why I hadn't seen this movie is because I really don't fucks with sharks. I'm not a fan of sharks. They terrify me. Typically, and I think this is a big reason why I'm still alive, and why, pending something catastrophic, now, knock on wood, I think I'm going to stay alive for a while, is I typically don't put myself in situations where there's a high percentage chance of death. I've never been to space. I don't go into the ocean a ton. I don't play in traffic. I recycle. These are all good things. And the fact is, sharks, I think, are terrifying creatures. And I remember about, oh man, when was it? Summer of 2023. There was that video. It was just on Twitter of that guy getting eaten by a shark. And, and I got to listen to all these, I'll get to the movie in a second, but this is very important to me. I got to listen to all these libs on social media be like, well, it's the guy's fault because he's in the shark's waters and that's his area. No, it's not. The second, and I'm telling you, the second that a shark gets opposable thumbs and can put on a suit to go to a job interview or run for president, you know what? Everything's off limits at that point. Then, yes, sharks can step foot on land. They can do whatever they want. Until then, I've never seen a human eat a shark. They probably have. That's probably happened quite a few times. It's probably a bad comparison. But whatever. Let's get on to this movie, this classic 1975 film directed by Steven Spielberg. I guess off the bat, the premise is very simple. Like I said, there's a shark in a town that is eating a bunch of people. Mayor doesn't want to close the beaches for tourism reasons. Rashidner, who is the newly elected, are they elected? Police chief of the city, says that they should. And then ultimately what happens is that these three main characters go on a boat and try to defeat this thing. Ultimately, look, I did really enjoy this. I'm not going to like every one of these. Just laws of probability. There's going to be some of these classic movies I come away from yawning at or sighing at or just not thinking much of, but I think the big thing with a film that is as highly regarded as Jaws is, the question is going to be, do I understand why this is historically relevant? Do I understand why this is a film that has really increased in popularity since it's coming up on the 50-year anniversary of its release? And the answer is yes. I think what makes Jaws work for me, and there's a lot of things, is the fact that it's essentially a B-movie premise. I mean, this is going to sound dumb, but it's not that much different than Sharknado or, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes or something like that. At least I don't feel like, where you just have a beast, or maybe more like those Godzilla movies. You have a beast, you have a monster that's going around killing people, but it's so well done, and the writing really surprised me. There's some really memorable lines of dialogue. Some of them I knew before I even came in to see this. The lifeless eyes, black eyes like a doll's eyes. And the three main characters, Quint especially, they all have some really good dialogue and some really memorable moments, but on a technical level, it's where I get why this became such a big hit back in the day and why it continues to stay relevant. One of the things about this that I think is awesome and why I recommend that people watch it is it's so a movie that couldn't get made today. It really takes its time. And when I say it's slow, I'm not saying I was bored by it, but if this film were to be made today, there'd be a certain amount of action beats that the filmmakers would feel like they would need to hit every 5-10 minutes. Whereas with this, I mean, they really build up to showing you the shark. And I know that's been a very famous thing in cinema ever since, is like, how long do you wait to show the monster? But like with this, I mean, it's a good hour until you really get a solid glimpse of this thing. And if they did it today, the shark would be done completely in CG. It'd be the Meg. You want to know what you want to know what Jaws would be like if it was made in modern age? It would be the Meg. And which, has its merits, right? But I just appreciate the fact that they really built up with this. And then when they finally show the shark, and of course, it's very famous that they kind of wanted to show it more, but it was a mechanical shark that wasn't really working. But when they show it, man, the effect is great. I mean, practical effects, that's the way to go with this stuff. Like, yeah, it's fake, but within the world of the movie, you believe it. And I think that Spielberg as a director, but even more so John Williams as the composer for this, because everyone knows the musical score for Jaws, do a great job of really making you feel the weight and the fear regarding this shark. I think sometimes movies do a poor job of that, where you have something, a character or a creature that is larger than life. It should feel larger than life. While I don't love this movie, I think a relatively recent film that did a great job of this was Gareth Edwards' Godzilla, where Godzilla just felt massive in that. And here, you get the impression that this shark could tear apart the entire town if it wanted to, and that adds to the tension. And then when you get to the final 45 minutes to an hour, you have a lot of legitimate action. I think that this was probably viewed as really original at the time. There's a lot of tropes in this movie that I've seen played out in movies that I've seen over the last 29 years of my life. It's kind of hard to criticize this film for it, but having seen these tropes done repeatedly, it made some of what happens relatively predictable. I did really like the fact that this movie, it's 2 hours, but it just ends. That was one thing I've kind of thought about. And again, not a complaint, it's actually positive, is so many movies nowadays, they after the final conflict is finished, they feel a need to go on for another 10, 15 minutes. This movie just stops. Hey, I'm not going to say what happens, but the shark is the shark, and the movie's over. Again, if they would have made it today, they would have tried to set up for a sequel, or, ooh, the shark is still alive, which, in fairness, they did go on to make 3 more Jaws movies, and I'm sure we'll get a remake or a reboot at some point here in the future. But yes, for the first edition, technically, of this first watch series, I very much recommend Jaws. I think Jaws is really well done. If you haven't seen it, I recommend seeing it. It strikes me as a film that would have been really fun to see in a theater. I think that the movie does a very good job of getting you connected to the characters, and even more so, getting you to feel a sense of fear towards this shark. And there is something very satisfying about they just cannot get a grip of this frickin' thing. And so it becomes very satisfying at the end when you feel like they're kind of reeling it in, no pun intended. So yeah, 8.5 out of 10. Again, the only complaints that I can have about a movie like this is just like, do I see myself repeatedly watching it over the next decade or so? No, but if somebody came to me and said this is their favorite movie, I would totally understand. Like, it hits all the beats it needs to hit. There's nothing about it that's particularly bad, just some stuff that I didn't think was great. But as a whole, good dialogue, good story, great effects, and obviously you have one of the world's greatest directors at the helm for this. So yeah, that's the first one in these series. We're going to continue these after Austin gets done with the production on this one. What do you guys want to see me watch next? Trust me, there is plenty. I wrote down a list of about 50 movies that we're going to try to cover at some point over the next year or two. I really want to do this once a week. If you want to follow all our other content, go to castellanicontent.com. You guys are the best. Appreciate all of you. Thank you very much for all your love and support, and now go for a swim.